Hey, friends. Welcome to another empowering episode of the Self-Love Strong podcast. Today, we're honored to have an amazing guest, Emily Manternach, a certified life coach, yoga guide, and Ayurveda counselor, joining us with a unique blend of engineering precision and yogic wisdom. Emily has dedicated her life to guiding others towards self-actualization and holistic well-being. Through her platform, MBody NMind Yoga, she empowers individuals to find their inner peace, embrace self-love, and live authentically. Welcome, Emily, to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you, Sam. It's so great to be here. It's great to think about self-love and how important that is in our overall well-being. So I appreciate that you have this podcast for folks to learn and be able to do more of that.
Yes. I thank you for the work that you're already doing in that realm. Emily, can you share your perspective on why self-care and self-love are vital for our overall well-being?
Yes, definitely. So self-care and self-love, there's a little bit of difference in what that means. Sometimes self-care and self-love does include others. So I think that's something and a distinction worth keeping track of, right? When we're doing self-care, sometimes it's nice to do things for other. Being a person of increase is kind of what I call it. And being able to give, that feels good for ourselves. When we're depleted, right? And we're feeling like, oh, fatigue, lethargic, things like that. That's when self-care becomes more inward and self-based. So I think it's important to make that distinction. And when we build upon that, we can talk about like, hey, my cup is full, so I can help flow that into others and bring that in. And that's where our self-care becomes important. And when we take those steps each day that are loving, right? Of, hey, I'm going to brush my teeth as a super simple example, like my teeth and gums, that care is important. That's a form of self-love in a very simplistic manner. Now, self-love, jumping a little bit from self-care to self-love and expanding on that, is broader than that. So self-love can be something simple like the simple tasks of brushing your teeth. We call that dinacharya in Ayurveda, and the little habits and rituals that we do to make our day amazing, right? The time we might set aside for meditation or exercise, if that's yoga or something else, whatever that is. That's important to be able to have the love inside and say, I'm going to take care of myself and love myself for what I need and what I want in the world and in for myself, because then that can radiate out. And those habits build, those rituals build to allow us to have more love, more peace inside, right? When we're taking care, when we're loving ourselves, that feels good and allows us to have people come in that same frequency. Gratitude becomes more abundant. We feel that. And then we see all these good things in life, right? Like, ooh, I'm on my run or I'm in my yoga practice and gosh, I really needed pigeon today. Or down dog felt so good that it was something that invigorated and brought more energy. Therefore, allowing that energy to really spill over and bring life to those people around us. That spark, ultimately, right? Our energy from spirit is what provides us more life and then fulfills that for others. So they go together. They do have an impact on others and they do involve others, right? Both self-care and self-love. But ultimately, they are getting us back to that self-realized, self-actualization process in our way of being and who we want to be in the world. And that's when we feel the alignment. We feel strongly that our purpose and our fulfillment is happy and feels good.
Oh, man, that is so beautiful and powerful, man. I really love how you distinguish the both between the two, because I like how you said, many people, they do limp in self-care with self-love, all the same thing. But I love how you really broke it down there and realizing that, that self-care is where we really build that foundation, is that really that inner work, like you said. We show ourselves love with setting those tasks. Like you said, like I love that, like brushing your teeth. And really, when we blend those things together and we're working on ourselves, we're able to show up better for others. That's such a powerful way to look at that, and why it's so important to really make those a priority. I love that.
Yeah, it's so important because if you look at self-actualization, some of the initial methods of how it came about, and I'll relate this back to yoga a little bit so you know where it comes in for what I do. But it kind of started with Maslow's hierarchy, right? And before then, there are many other methods, but a simple way where he actually built this pyramid, almost like the food pyramid, if some people are familiar with that. But in psychology, when we have our lower needs taken care of and wants like shelter, food, water, safety, then we can work on those other things in our lives and figure out, well, I would like to have friends. I'd like to have family. And really we get to that point of feeling I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And there's more than just being here on earth. There's a reason for all the experiences we're having and what that means to the greater purpose, the greater consciousness of all of us. We've got to be able to tap into that. But those other needs and that care allows us to do that. And where it ties into yoga and what I do is that in yoga, we have ethics, morals, beliefs, those core values that are important. And that leads us to be able to actually do the stretching, the movement, the breath work, the breath that brings us life, right? That's prana or chi, depending on which version a person follows. And then it allows us to actually rest and say, what is coming in from spirit? Where is that coming from? What is important in my life? What matters through my meditation, right? The thoughts that come up, we can notice them and say, oh, this is coming up for some reason, right? And it must be important if I can't forget it for some reason, right? Whether that's something that we need to process or work through or figure out a different way to think about or come up with something new in our lives to feel better about our lives and what we do. All of that goes into the self-actualization or self-realization samadhi in yoga. And so they tie together when we think about it, that we've got to have the structure and idea of our self-identity, as well as those lower things in the hierarchy, if you want to call it that, of what we need, food and water, right? We get the idea of being hangry, and that doesn't help us in situations, right? So if those lower things aren't taken care of, or the stress of like, I don't know where I'm going to sleep, that's a whole different experience. So when we take care of those other things can really come into alignment, and we feel that purpose for what can be known beyond what we're currently day to day might be doing, rather than going task to task, or okay, I've got this next and that next, and getting in the car, driving, going, coming back home, getting up, going to sleep, and figuring out, okay, am I feeling good about my days or not? And how do we change that? Those things are important to help us figure out.
Man, so powerful. I mean, just to hear, like you said, that there's a hierarchy of getting those basic things taken care of. And I think that's so powerful when you said that, because many times we're finding ourselves not taking those basic things and wanting ourselves to get, like you said, to show up at that self-actualization, to show up better in our life for ourselves and others, but we're not taking care of those basic things. But I love how you said, when we take care of those, we're able to focus on the other things and really find ourselves back in alignment. That's so powerful in a day where so many things are pulling us sideways. But I love how you said it's really taking care of those basic things to allow yourself to get to that next level. That's so awesome to hear that.
Yeah, it's truly important. That's what fills our cup and actually allows us to say, yeah, I can handle these other things, and our capacity for all the other aspects in our life increases when those things are taken care of. And probably part of why meal prepping or those other tasks that make those things easier have come into alignment with the current of today's society, right? We're enjoying leftovers or having those things. Some people do and some people don't. I get it. But knowing that it can be easier to do and some of those tasks that are routine allows us to go beyond what the normal, what we might consider normal of what we can do in a day. And when that capacity increases, the world's our oyster. So we can find the pearls and figure out what that is and be able to do it all, if we want to call it that. It's also important too, because if we're in that mode of we can do it all, we've got to remember those other things are important, right? So spending time with people and getting enough rest at the right times. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'll just take a nap later. And I found myself in that too, right? Like, oh, I'll just take a nap later. It's okay. But that actually has an effect on the body of our repair times per the circadian rhythm. And when melatonin comes out, all those things, we're tired for a reason when the sun goes down. And we feel better when the sun comes up and we wake up and we get to see the light, because the body was made that way. And that's part of how we relate back to nature. A plant is going to grow better in the sunlight because it likes the sun and it needs it for photosynthesis. Yeah. We feel that we don't have chlorophyll. We feel the same, right? We like that sunlight for the vitamin D. And so recognizing where's that balance for our lives and where we want to be too, because that's how self-care and self-love have become important in today's society. As those polls, as you were mentioning, Sam, come up, I've been working a lot on inspired no's. So what is something that, okay, this sounds great, right, to do, but does it bring more life and more energy? Ooh. Or is it just something that I'm going to fill the calendar with? Is it just something, well, now I'm going? What are the things that are actually going to bring me towards my future and the goals that I want, a life that I would love, rather than just doing it because it came up? It does make a difference if a person has pets, family, right? There are some things, it's not necessarily an obligation, but there are some things that we've got to help each other out with. And that's where we refill by doing that giving process and receiving the gift of what that is. So just to be clear, there's different levels and a process through all of that.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Emily. I think that's so strong. I love did you say it was an inspired nose in our life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love those questions you asked right there. I think that's so powerful because many times, like you said, we find ourselves on that, what we would call maybe a hamster wheel of life, where you're doing the same thing over and over, but we're not moving with the clarity like you had in those questions. And is this decision or is this action really going to take me to where I want to be, to, like you said, self-actualize? Am I bringing my best self? But I love those questions you asked right there. I think that's super important, just to have clarity with where you're trying to go. And I love, most important, like you said, realizing that there's not just really a one-size-fits-all approach, because like you said, we all have different obligations, whether it be pets, family, but realizing that you can still ask yourself those questions and really make sure you are in line with what you're really looking to achieve. That's so awesome. I love that.
Yeah, it's been a game changer for me, right? Because it's like one of those things, I'm my highest authority. So each of us is our highest authority. And if I'm hearing myself, part of this came from an idea of being like, okay, go do it all. And there's all these opportunities in the world. And okay, doing all these different things. But when we send our energy and our focus to what's important, then we know that that energy is going to come back or be fulfilled in a good way. And so if that energy is coming back, we feel good. And then we don't have to get into like, oh, I didn't go to bed by 10 o'clock or whatever it is. And get in the hamster wheel of that of, oh, I didn't go to bed by 10 o'clock last night. And now I didn't go to bed because I added these other things in. And normally, even in those situations where there's someone else involved or another being, there are times where, we can ask and work through that. And that's the beauty of connection and being able to have conversation, right? And when we know ourselves and we know how we truly feel, we feel self-realized, self-actualized, those conversations get easier because we can say, I feel, and put it in our point of view, allows us to not have that victim mentality or, feel like the other person is at fault too, because then those conversations become easier. We can say, no, it's something in me that doesn't feel right in whatever the situation is. And I would like to change it. How can we work together to do that? And that brings more energy, more life, right? So we don't feel like we're just doing something because someone asked us to, or doing something because we feel like we have to. There is if for anybody who's running their own business, right? There's the things of like, oh, you got to post every day and you got to do this and this and this. There's a point of view too of if it doesn't feel right. I mean, pay your taxes, that kind of stuff, right? That's important. Follow ethics, morals. I do think those are important. That's part of my own ethics and morals, right? But we are allowed to choose and decide and work through what that looks like for us as well. So it gets into what is it? What is it we want to do every day? And how do we want to be as we do it? And then we can actually respond, right? Rather than react and feel the love coming back and feeling that within too.
Man, that is so powerful, Emily. Man, I love that. And I love those questions you asked right there. Man, you have so much experience, Emily. I would love to hear, how did your journey with yoga begin and what led you to explore that sister science of Ayurveda? If I said that correctly.
You got it. Yeah, you got it. You're good. Yeah. So I had gone to college. I grew up in a small town. So when I went to college, it was a little bit bigger town and there was a yoga class. And I thought, you know what, I need to do something for my exercise. I wasn't involved in the same sports. When you're in high school or something like that, it's easy to just say, yeah, I'm going to go out and do this. And you join the team and you go and it's scheduled. And when you're in college, it's like, well, you have all these opportunities. What are you going to do? Yeah. So I chose to go to a yoga class and I loved it. After the first class, we had meditation at the end and I just felt this release of, the weight of the world isn't on your shoulders and you can be okay, especially with a lot of changes. When someone moves, whether you're moving to college or whether you're moving in general, there are things that come up with that. That's a lot of change for the body to process. And so I went, I loved it. I started practicing, going routinely, but then also did a lot of practice on my own. The class time changed. So when I started practicing on my own, that's when I was like, oh, this feels really good, or that feels really good. And over time, that became the staple of, what I was going to do. And once you start to make it your staple, you start to feel the emotional piece, the spiritual piece, the mental piece of it working, right? And exercise in any form is good for our mental health or our mental well-being. And that's a good thing, right? Because the serotonin and the other changes that help out with our day-to-day being. But in yoga too, sometimes it goes a little bit deeper. Like we talk about how we release trauma and we have a safe space to do that. And that's important on the mat. So anyways, a sidetrack for a moment. So I was practicing that, doing other activities and exercises too. I added some Ayurveda, just the Dinacharya, those other tips to help me be able to do my career as an engineer. So I had studied chemical engineering in college. That's what I went to school for. And I was like, okay, how can I build these habits into my life that makes it easier So when I do need to go to work, I've got these things packed that are gonna bring me nourishment and fulfillment. So I was doing that and working through what that looks like in my life. Over time, right, I was doing more at work, and it came to a point where I was working from like 6 in the morning till 10 p.m. And I had tried like setting alarm and saying, hey, you gotta go home. It's 4:30, it's 6 o'clock, whatever that is. I tried the like, hey, my friend's calling me, you gotta go. And it wasn't quite working, right? Like there were times that it worked, but there were also times where I was like, this isn't gonna take too long. I'm just gonna wrap it up. I wanted to do my best, part of that, right? And really make the progress. So anyways, it was like September, hadn't taken vacation yet. I called in my family. They didn't have anything. They were like, nah, like it's not super exciting. We're just doing day-to-day life. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take a week off, go work on my Zen and learn more about this. It's been a staple to be a yoga teacher. So got trained as a yoga teacher. And then I knew that by doing that and going to teach, that I was going to have to be there, right? There was no way for me to be like, oh, you've got 6 students or more, however many it was, and you're not in the front of the class, right? So for me, it was also a way to say, here's how I'm going to use my time. And there were so many benefits of it sticking with me that I had been realizing that it was great to share that. It's helped me a ton with stress and many other things in life. So I started doing more of the teaching, and it was this commitment outside of work, which was great and helped me recognize like, okay, let's shift. What are these other priorities and things that are important in life other than just the hours spent working? And then it grew. So as I learned more, I started teaching in different places and doing different things. Students would come, or there would be experiences where maybe somebody would get upset and be crying on the mat at the end of class, or they'd be like, hey, when we go through the asana today, can you help with this? Or I'm having these thoughts come up. Can you help with this during meditation? Or what works for this? And I was like, okay. So it's using the tools I had through my training as a yoga teacher, but I realized that there's so much more. And I remembered my Ayurveda, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what I shifted to help me. And I was talking about the habits, but I didn't have necessarily the certification at the time. So I got certified, gained a ton more knowledge from my teachers, and appreciated that, right? They're lovely, lovely people. And then started sharing more of that. So it really evolved, and it started to evolve even more into beyond on the mat, right? Building community. I've got a group we get together at least once a month just to know like someone else has your back. It's a great way to be able to say, oh man, I had this issue go on. I'm going to call so-and-so because they're going to go to yoga practice too. So they can come pick me up if that's the case, a car issue or something. Or, just having someone else to talk to. We also do bucket list items. So let's live our life, right? Like if you want to go skydiving, you want to go hot air ballooning, we've done both. And it was like, take somebody with you. So that way we can build and expand upon our life experiences too. And coaching came into that as part of it as well, because we've got to dive deeper when those things start coming up, past traumas, whatever they are, the issue in the tissue per se. Then what do we do with it? If we're feeling like we don't love ourselves, right? How do we shift from that mentality to I love myself and I can laugh at my own jokes, even if nobody else thinks they're funny? Those things are important. And figuring out how to make that shift is what the coaching and some of the Ayurveda and those other things really help with off the mat.
Man, it's so powerful. I love that story of how you really made that time for yourself. I think many of us, like we all find ourselves busy at work, wanting to strive for more and be successful in our career. But I love how, you were like, this is something that I need. But you made it a non-negotiable by scheduling it in, not only scheduling it, but then you're like, hey, this is going to commitment. I need to make sure a way where I can squeeze this in. And I think that's a massive form, would you say, of just not only self-care, but self-love right there, but realize that I need some time for myself, even though I'm successful at my job. That's such a powerful message in itself right there, making yourself a priority. But for those that are unfamiliar with what, can you explain a little bit of what Ayurveda is and how it complements yoga and promoting that holistic health? Can you explain a little bit about what it is?
Yes, definitely. Thanks for recognizing that too about the self-love for the commitment. That's beautiful. I hadn't thought about it in that way, so I appreciate it. I do. So Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. It is all about what we digest. So yoga is on the mat. I talked about how it's got a little bit about morals and ethics, and then it's got the movement, the breath work, the meditation, and the process through meditation that we come to a blank mind, if you want to call it that, or really open up to spirit and hear what's coming through from our heart rather than just the head, right? And finding a good place for that and what our true purpose is. Ayurveda is more about the science of life. So how does the body work? If I have a shoulder pain, is that shoulder pain because I'm trying to do all these things and it feels like too much? And I try to stretch it out and all of these things and it's still there, right? And I've got to do some inspired no's. Or is it because there's actually something going on where maybe the joint has an issue or the muscles around it? And so when we sit down through Ayurveda, we try to figure some of that out and we say, okay, what's going on there? How is that inflammation coming up? Beyond that, we do work with other things. So it's healing and preventative, a lot more preventative, because if we do the practices of dinacharya, other self-love practices early on, like cleaning the mouth well, then that actually affects what's going on in the blood, in the brain, and in the heart, and in the body, just from our mouth and the bacteria, right? It also affects beyond what we digest. And what we digest isn't just what we eat. We're also digesting what we hear, what we say, our thoughts, and our environment. So if we're in a space that doesn't have sunlight, we feel that. And if we're in a space where it's like hustle and bustle, go, 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 we feel that. And if a person wants to kind of test it out, you can imagine being at a concert when you're like surrounded by all these people versus being out in nature. Like we know that feels different, and how that helps our body shift is what happens in the nervous system and how comfortable. So if we're super comfortable with ourselves and have that self-love going, then being in an environment that might be faster paced, we might be able to protect our energy and save what we need, but also recognize, hey, we need some rest after this, right? Because there's tons of things going on all the time that, we're not in control of. We're in control of ourselves, and that we've got to recognize and be aware of that. We can affect the influence from others too by how we respond or react. And so all of that comes into where we're at in our nervous system and our digestion. When we're in like an anxious state, or when we're in a state that things are moving really fastly around us, sometimes our food will come in and go out faster. Sometimes it'll get stuck depending on what's going on in the body. And if we think about our environment and the people we're around has that big of an effect on what's going on with the food, then we can also think about, okay, well, why are those things, like what personality or other traits, qualities are coming up that are helping to cause certain things going on in the body? And what do we need to change? And what could help us balance that out? Sometimes we can't change things immediately, right? So we've got to be aware. But if we make these small changes, either in our thoughts or in what we eat, it can help balance us out. For example, if we're not drinking enough water, we know that once our lips or our tongue gets dry, that there's not enough water. But there are times where we can recognize that in advance, and it's helpful. it's also affecting when that's happening, then, we're dry in the body elsewhere too. And so the body's working harder for each cell to process and truly nourish our full functionality. And so Ayurveda dives into all of that. It's more about taking the lifestyle of yoga off the mat into that broader piece of science. How do we emulate nature, yet understand what's best for us? A little bit more about Ayurveda is there are different ways that we all are born. And that can kind of get into like where the stars are, things like that, but also the amount of the different elements. So I practice 5 elements: earth, air, water, fire, and space. And I did say 5, right? Earth, air, water, fire, space. Yes. Okay, cool. And those affect us they're part of everything. So all of the molecules on Earth were made with certain things. And so when we recognize that, then we can say, well, what's in me, right? How did the cells that came to be part of me, where did they come from when that happened? And what's part of me? And how do I balance that out? So if I'm living in a really warm climate, coconut water is actually cooling. So it might balance me out and give me more water instead of the fire and the heat, as an example. Or if I'm living in a cold environment, it might be helpful to eat some more spicy food because it'll help warm up the body. And if I'm feeling angry, getting into more emotional, if I'm feeling angry, it might not be good to eat something spicy because it's going to heat me up even more and send the food through faster. If I'm feeling really calm and I'm like, I don't want to go do anything today, maybe it is good to add some spice or hot sauce or something to what you're eating as a way to get things going and moving, and so we can digest fully our food and nourish ourselves healthy.
Wow. Man, it's really awesome how it really dives into the in-depth part. Many times when we do yoga, you think about the physical part, but I really love how it really goes deep on the inside and really helps you identify some things. Like that was pretty awesome where you talked about just, the shoulder, for instance, where you were really, is this, do I need some inspired nose, or is it actually something that's overuse, like the muscles or tendons? It's really awesome to have the introspection and really identify why we feel certain ways and why we perceive things in a certain way. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a great thing. And that's where it all comes together, right? Our self-understanding, our self-realization allows us to give the self-love, the self-care that we need. And the more we understand that and how we work, sometimes we can help relate to others better too. So then the world, right? Like becomes better, at least from my perspective, because if I can be peaceful and help be my best, then the person next to me can be peaceful, healthy, their best, or heal from what they need to, depending on what's going on, And that's where the rubber meets the road for what I feel like I do in all of the different forms and different modalities. Because ultimately, when we can get along, there are some amazing and very, very smart, creative individuals and things that can happen. And it's just, it's truly beautiful to see the different things and how we can all come together.
Man, I love that. That is so cool. And like you said, it's just so powerful. Man, all of that. It's just such a powerful thing. Like you said, really showing up your best self. So as a life coach, how do you define self-actualization, and why is it so important, would you say?
Yeah, so self-actualization is about when we feel aligned with our purpose, when our inner light is sparked and the energy is flowing out freely as well as flowing in, right? So we've got to feel like that life is coming to us and it's continuing. Life is beautiful, right? It's abundant. There's so many amazing things happening every day. And that's no matter those little things that might get under our skin, because that's one part of the day. It doesn't have to be the focal point of the day. And so when we talk about that self-actualization, that self-realization, it allows us to process those experiences a little bit easier. So, okay, that happened. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but I can work through that either, being assertive and saying, oh, my order is wrong, or being understanding and saying, oh, they kind of have some other things going on. So let's work with them to figure out what's going on. Those things help us process and work through it. And then we feel good, right? When it comes down to the end of the day, and we can focus on those things that actually do bring us energy and bring more energy and peace to the world too, because those are the things that are going to innovate and help us improve as a full consciousness in society. So the importance is that bigger aspect. And to bring it home a little bit more, the idea of that one consciousness, right? We may not be able to read each other's minds, but we can get on the same wavelength and frequency with someone. And we know this because if we're thinking about someone and then they suddenly send us a message or they call us, we're connected. And that's where our intuition is working, but it's also that frequency of where we're at that's bringing that person to us or us going to that person. So it does affect in a greater level. That's just a one-to-one. But when you have an experience and you're like, okay, I'm going to go, for example, I'm going to go prepare for class and I have this plan for what we're going to do in our yoga class. But I think so-and-so is going through something with their knee and so-and-so is going through something with their back. And they've told me that they were sick. I hope they come back to class this week. And these other people are happy and healthy and they've loved and they're coming in. And so all of that energy is coming into the room and mixing in. So I prepare my plan. And then I go and I say, okay, what do you all need today? I do ask for requests typically at the beginning of practice just because I don't know, something might have changed since the last time I saw that individual or the individuals in the room. So it's helpful for them to be able to communicate and feel heard. And then that may shift what my plan is, right? They'd be like, oh, my back feels great today. I'm like, awesome. I'm glad either way. And that brings in some more peace and that understanding. And then we can focus on what we truly do need. And that brings it to like the greater consciousness. When I predict, whether they told me or not, what we might need for class. And then when I get it right, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm in tune. Like I'm connected to that person or those people. And it's the same too when we think about the bigger picture, right? I might be thinking about something and someone else in another part of the world is also doing something similar. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't make me any less unique or them any less unique, but it is bringing that innovation back into the world and working through entropy and physics. And so a great example of this is when people were working on the vaccine for COVID, right? That was a global issue, international, everywhere. And we were all in it together. There was no like, oh, we don't have to worry about it over here. It was like everybody needs to worry about it. And so people were working. They're like, we want a solution. They're working on it. They're trying to engineer something and come up with these new ways. And like, oh, we have this. Can we try that? And how many different types of vaccines did we have? We had multiple, right? And the theories and the methods, some of them were similar. They might have had like these little pieces that were different. And that's part of the uniqueness. But they were similar. When we came up with mRNA, it was actually found in a couple of different places. There's probably some shared knowledge and, there's very smart people out there that are like, oh, I want to read all of these things and learn, right? But there are times too where it's like, oh, I didn't know they were thinking about that. And I was too. How cool, right? So it just kind of brings that greater consciousness and how it does fit together on a grander scheme. Each of our little things that we do does have an impact.
Man, that's so powerful, so true. Like you said, everything really has an impact, and everything's full connection. Like you said, that's where the rubber meets the road. We're all doing that work, and we're all interconnected and doing our part. Man, Emily, your message and your knowledge is so powerful. But I want to I know the listeners here are listening to this. I want them to know, like, Emily, where can people stay connected with you at?
Yes, most definitely. So you can definitely find more on my website, or I'm also on Facebook and Instagram if you want to go under MBody NMind. And my website is www.embodynmindyoga.com. I think we're going to put it in the link. So thanks, Sam, for doing that. And you'll be able to easily get there. I also have a speaking engagement where I'm going to talk about yoga for self-actualization coming up in May. It's part of a Master X group event that we're doing internationally. It's global. So this weekend we have mindset. Last week when he had leadership, we have 5 total topics. So if somebody's interested in learning a little bit more, they can definitely attend that in May through Master X. And I'll send you the link so we can put that up.
Awesome. You guys, like Emily said, I'm going to make it super simple for you. I'm going to put all of her links to her website and to her socials as well. So make sure you go over there and, screenshot this episode and say, Emily, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Make sure you connect with her on her website and, be a part of that global X exchange. So I want to make sure I have all of her links to, her talks. She's going to talk about more yoga, and right there, making sure this isn't the only time you hear from Emily, but if you had a message, inspiration for the listeners, what would you like to leave them with?
Great question. You can tell that I needed a moment to pause. Sorry. But if anything, have the belief in yourself and, take the deep breath. Go for what feels good and really know that you're a spiritual being having a human experience. And that means that you're far more capable than what you might think. So don't limit yourself in what you're going to do. Figure out and think about it. If there's something you would really love in your life, you can do it. I believe in you.
Man, that is powerful and beautiful at the same time, man. Emily, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your message. And like I said, guys, making sure you follow her on all of her socials. Like I said, the links are going to be right under this episode, so you can click on the links. Make sure you visit her website. She has so much knowledge, so much more to share with you, and realize that you don't have to do this journey alone. She has all that experience to help you and coach you through the process as well. All right, friends. Thank you guys so much. Y'all take care.